If you think people that have been able to operate in government currency in the shadows with credit, getting treasuries, risk-off returns for hundreds of years, want to see a sound money public ledger get adopted by the world, that's like saying you want the Second Amendment to be global. You want everybody to just have everybody gets a gun. That would be like saying the same thing. They don't want it. They don't want that. You know why they don't want that? Because it just makes it harder for them to do what they want to do.
Yo, 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 and welcome back to another episode of the Nyc Griff Show. Today is Tuesday, March 5th, 6:48 p.m. And the price of Bitcoin has gone up recently, and isn't everybody excited about it, Griff? I just want to go ahead and state something for the folks out there. This Bitcoin that we're talking about, right, that's gone up and down in USD price. This Bitcoin, the network, right, this is the network of distributed ledgers, right, that are all kept on these computers around the world. And part of this network involves a consensus mechanism called proof of work, where all these computers, they compete against each other to try to find the correct answer for the block, to add that block to the blockchain and get the reward, get the block reward, right? And these computers go really hard and they go really fast. And it's a game of probabilities in some sense, right? The faster I go, the higher my probability of winning that block is, right? Okay, now think about this in terms of the entire globally distributed network. There are 561 trillion hashes per second. That's 561 trillion guesses at that answer per second. Holy shit. We also know that number shoots us all the way up to, near all-time high levels in terms of the hash power or the computational power that's going into the network. Okay, this is now we're not talking about the same Bitcoin, because the Bitcoin in past didn't have as much computational power, didn't have as much security as this Bitcoin does today. Interesting. And also because the hash rate is at near all-time highs, meaning that there's more computers going that are streaming energy into the network. That also means that the difficulty target or the difficulty adjustment is also at all-time highs, meaning that algorithm or that calculation they're trying to do, that they're trying to find the answer for, that gets more and more difficult the more computational power is added to the network. As computational power is pulled away, right, back in, when was it, 2020 or 2021, Griff, when China banned Bitcoin mining? So in 2020, the hash rate goes way down, right? It gets like chopped in half or something like that, I think, right, Griff? Well, the difficulty adjustment adjusted down during that time because there was less computational power going into the network. Now, also, this is the exact same Bitcoin that we're talking about that is capped at 21 million Bitcoin. There will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin. And you might ask, how is it that cap is enforced? How does this work, right? We know the protocol dictates that there will only ever be 21 Bitcoin. How is that enforced? It's enforced via a halving cycle, which is coming up here this April, which is another very important thing. And what this halving cycle does is every time that a block is mined or found by a miner that is throwing in as many answers as they possibly can to find the right one, whenever that miner finds that answer, that exact miner, they get a reward for verifying and hashing that block onto and into the blockchain, right? They get this reward, and that's called a block subsidy or block reward, right? And whenever the protocol first started, you got 50 Bitcoin every block that was added to the blockchain. Now, the protocol also dictates with the difficulty adjustment that a block will be mined about every 10 minutes. So you can do the calculation, right? 10 minutes, how many times can I mine a block? How many blocks can I mine in an hour? I can mine 6 blocks in an hour if it's going to take about 10 minutes. You can do the math, right, and say how much Bitcoin is created every single day and every single year and all this. Well, every 210,000 blocks added to the blockchain, that block reward reduces by half. So when the protocol started, that miner got 50 Bitcoin, 50 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. And then it halved to 25 Bitcoin. And then it halved to 12.125 Bitcoin. And currently, every 10 minutes, the block or the miner that finds that block, that solves that problem, gets 6.25 Bitcoin. Okay. Now, this coming April, that Bitcoin reward will half again, and it'll drop from 6.25 to 3.125. Ooh, interesting. Now, there is 19,600,000, little more than that, Bitcoin that have already been mined. They've already been issued. They've already been created, meaning that there's only about 1.4 million Bitcoin left to actually be issued. So there's not a lot left, right? Now, at current market prices, Bitcoin is the 10th largest asset by market cap. That's denominated in dollars. So, take it with a grain of salt, but current market capitalization of $1.24 trillion. And this network also, Bitcoin that we're talking about, is permissionless, it's borderless, it's globally decentralized and distributed. There's no CEO or board of directors, and it's got virtually zero downtime. So you said that I needed to diversify my portfolio and buy the losers? This don't make any sense. See, now the fundamentals of Bitcoin have not changed. That's why it has the staying power that it does. That's why the numbers are going up the way that they are. Now, we also can't neglect the fact that there is speculation in the market. There are people out there, not like Griff and myself, that are leveraging dollars into Bitcoin. There are people that are not leveraging, but putting money into Bitcoin with only short-term expectations, with short-term intent to sell at a higher price whenever they can, right? Whatever their strategy is, it's a short-term strategy. And because those folks are in there, they're going to play an emotional game. And that's why you see a lot of the volatility, is because that in-out, it affects something so small like Bitcoin. So many folks love to talk about the volatility, right? People want to talk about volatility. Yeah. We got it. We heard it. See, what this photo illustrates, right? And right now we're currently just over $1 trillion market cap. So let's think about some of these other markets and their sizes, and how does that compare to Bitcoin? This is in this photo specifically. These numbers may be off a little bit, but equities is a $90 trillion market. Real estate, I don't know. These are very general, so this is probably aggregate residential, commercial, 220 trillion. Derivatives, 600 to 1,200 trillion. Bonds, 130 trillion. Currencies, 120 trillion. Gold, 11 trillion. Silver, we actually, I think, are just about to pass on the largest market capitalization, or in terms of market capitalization, which is interesting. But you think about the moves up and down in Bitcoin, right? And people say, "Oh my gosh, it's so volatile." Dude, we're talking about something that is so tiny. It's so tiny compared to the markets that it's being compared to. The dots are too far away to try to connect if you haven't understood or worked to understand some of the context as to why, which comes back to the problem, we got to understand the problem.
That's one of the biggest problems we have today, is that people think that you think the government created like everything. And I'm like, there is such a thing as like natural talent, or just like people who are pretty amazing that like don't have the same type of motives you have. I don't know. It's a very diverse species. So like, I think just weird stuff. Generally speaking, I just think like most of what we see day to day is just like, of course, it's very weird. Have you ever read like a history book or any religious text? This is an interesting place that we live in. Very interesting. I mean, like Game of Thrones-esque. More interesting because we have phones. But taking the amount of power out of government's hands, which we can see is obviously a good thing. I hope. If you're listening to this podcast and you don't think it's pretty obvious that we would much rather go in a free market with a constitution than any form of government that we have now, you're probably listening to the wrong podcast, because nothing they do makes sense. It's just the most inefficient middleman to ever exist. And on top of that, they get to decide pretty much just like exactly how you live at this point. And the way it's going, it's more pervasive, it's stronger. So I would think Bitcoin is number one, because it takes the printing press, it takes the Constitution, it takes a gold standard, and it just multiplies it because it's software. I mean, it's just going to run. So whatever value Bitcoin has, at the end of the day, some of what the value of Bitcoin is whether people want to use it as money or not. In my opinion, I don't know what your opinion is, Nick. If you get to $1.3 trillion and we're going for the market of money, that means the total addressable market cap, if you agree that money is a market and you agree that Bitcoin obviously like has money in it, has $1 trillion, almost $1.5 trillion in it, then you'd agree that there is an addressable market for what the dollar values. And Bitcoin has 99.9999% to go. And it's only at 1.3 trillion. I mean, like, it's so weird to talk to people about anything else. And so Bitcoin, I think, really at the end of the day, it's probably the most important thing that we could talk about. I don't know what other people are talking about. Back when you first got into it, everybody was talking about Bitcoin. Everybody wanted to talk about Bitcoin. It was like the biggest thing ever. And now I'm like, dude, it technically hit like an all-time high today. And it does what Bitcoin does, as Jack Mallers says.
Nobody's talking about it.
Nobody's really talking about it. Like,
it seems like there's nobody talking about it, and it seems like there's been a lot of FUD thrown at the wall, and I think a lot of it has maybe not necessarily stuck, but I think it's kind of dampered. It's almost like insulated the people that are outside of the Bitcoin world from what's happening within the Bitcoin world, right? Because I think, although the FUD and the narratives and the propaganda, all this shit can't actually stop and break Bitcoin, they can muddy up what the truth is and make people hesitate longer. Now, could we speculate and say they're doing that for a reason? They want to try to suppress price. They want to try to get more Bitcoin at lower price than not, because they realize the incentives align so that they can't steal it. They actually have to like earn it some way. It's going to be really hard to take it. It's going to be really, really hard to take it if they wanted to try to do that. It's much more feasible. The incentives align so much more on capital expenditure and to get Bitcoin if they just follow the protocol and mine it, or they do business in it, they collect taxes in it. That's where the incentives are actually aligned. But I think that they might be doing a good job, and I'm going to speculation here, that I think that they've done a good job of muddying up the waters, insulating people from what the truth actually is of what the network is, how it's working, those things that we were discussing earlier, right? And they're doing that on purpose to suppress price so that they can buy more with their dollars, with their fiat, right? This isn't just an American thing. This is a global game.
Crypto's the greatest psyop they've run. We're talking COVID. We're talking whatever war you want to speak on. Crypto is the greatest marketing campaign, if you believe in a deep state or whatever, that is successfully launched in like the last 4 or 5 years. Everybody you talk to about Bitcoin talks about crypto. And I'm like, I can't tell you this like nicely enough. That shit is a scam. Every single one of them. And if you put your money into it, just know you might win, you might lose. You're gambling. And if you're smarter than some and you kind of know how to time it maybe a little better, God bless you. Like, take that money and do what you will with it. But you cannot talk about Bitcoin without crypto to new people. That, I think, is the most successful that they've done.
You don't have to go any further than FTX to see the the very close connections. Let's just say nothing more or nothing less than very close connections between federal money, government money, campaign money, and other foreign countries with FTX. You can't dispute it. I mean, not to say that, oh, this is what happened and that's that and this is this, but to say, hey, there's a lot of things that happened right here in this vicinity very closely, and turns out there's a lot of connections to and from in many different ways. Dare we say that the government's propagating some false narratives to muddy up the water so they can suppress the price of Bitcoin and buy it themselves?
The government has, but did you see the WEF commercial that supported Bitcoin mining?
I think I did hear about this. Tell me a little bit about this. What do you know about
this? It was basically there's a national park, I believe in North Africa, that already had hydroelectric mines, already produced cocoa beans, and had a lot of tourism. But in 2020, tourism down, they decided to start Bitcoin mining using the wasted hydroelectric. And they continued to do their cocoa beans and everything. And now they make $150,000 a month Bitcoin mining, which is enough to pay their entire staff. Tourism is back, and they still do the cocoa beans. So now they're just making way more money. And they're able to pay their entire staff with not even the profits they make from what they were doing before. And the WEF was like, this is really cool because this is like efficient energy usage with this hydroelectric thing. And I was just like, all right, that's
Griff, just think about this. Think about what this means. You can go anywhere in the world. You can be in the middle of fucking nowhere. And if you have some type of a water source, right, say like a river or something where you're running and generating power, or maybe there's some kind of geothermal, right? Whether it's water that's coming up that's like hot springs, or if it's actual lava with something like a volcano, or if it's wind. However, you can generate energy in some area like this, where in times past it was too inefficient to get that energy to market for that geographical area to flourish. Now you can plug in a Bitcoin miner into however you're generating power, right? You generate that power, run it through a Bitcoin miner or in an entire setup, however large you set it up, and you can profitably monetize that energy with a connection to the internet. And now we're talking about geographical areas that were previously locked or lost or just so far out in no man's land that it was too inefficient for things to flourish in those areas. Now you can do that with Bitcoin. And that's the same network that you and I are operating with here in America. And the same that anybody in Europe or Asia or anywhere else in the world. This is the exact same global network.
And people want to hate, my brother. They want to say, like, this is not a good thing. This is not what's next. This is like AI is bigger. Yeah, I might be into it. Yeah, obviously, from a portfolio perspective, if
you're significantly biased.
I'm significantly biased, and I always have Bitcoin on the brain. But I'm always, more than Bitcoin, just thinking about the sheer fact that I don't care what your conspiracy theory is, whether you are one, aren't one, what religion you are, whatever. Bitcoin fundamentally changes what money is. It's the greatest innovation to money, if there's an innovation to ever exist, which means the people who have all the money, however you want to, if you think Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world, God bless your heart. Like, seriously, you're not reading, like, at all. Like, you're not doing any homework whatsoever. But he's rich. But if you think that the people potentially beyond Jeff Bezos, or even say, let's say an Elon Musk, but probably Elon Musk included, want anything different than fractional reserve lending, treasuries, the ability to basically take over nation states without even being there, via banking and interest rate and loans and all of these things, right? All of these funny money things. If you think for 1 second that they enjoy seeing Bitcoin go up against every currency in the world, you're losing your mind. They hate it. And in my opinion,
who is they? Who are you saying they are?
well, really,
The bankers, the Fedsters, the government, the
but
governments.
the people pulling, it's the people with the Pinocchio strings, my friend. Like
Yeah.
the people
that are controlling everything through
not,
the centrally controlled
people
money.
who've been there for history. They're not like, I do like, here's the one thing I believe, guys. It's very hard to read about these people, but there are families who have money that have signed declarations that have been there in the past that their names literally just don't pop up on the global stage at this point. What do you think they're doing? Like, what do you think is going on? And what do you think some of our politicians are at this point, this late into the dollar stage, which you could argue is really at this point the worst iteration of money to ever exist. And the standard of the dollar has been around, give or take around World War I being over. So the 1920s, even though it was the Depression, that's when like it all kind of started coming here and we started becoming the biggest creditor in the world. So we're running down the line here of what the US dollar can be. And historically speaking, that means something crazy is about to happen. And the last time this happened, it essentially was a bankers' war between the Rothschilds and the Zionist Declaration. And I think it's the Belledorf Declaration of 1917, where the Zionists got Israel because they helped the King and Queen of England win World War I. But you guys take out the conspiracies, right? That actually happened. So whether you think the King and Queen of England are the ones making the decisions, or you think that there's somebody pulling the strings from behind the scenes, or who owns all the banks, or where did it all start, if you think that those people, in whatever imagination you have or don't have, I don't care, textbook, not textbook, doesn't matter to me. If you think that those people want to see Bitcoin go up against all the currencies, you're losing your mind. They hate it. And if you think there's something bigger going on, you're lying to yourself. If you think people that have been able to operate in government currency in the shadows with credit, getting treasuries, risk off returns for hundreds of years, want to see a sound money public ledger get adopted by the world, that's like saying you want the Second Amendment to be global. You want everybody to just have gun. Everybody gets a gun. That would be like saying the same thing. They don't want it. They don't want that. You know why they don't want that? Because it just makes it harder for them to do what they want to do. And what their end goal is, whatever. I don't know. That does get into conspiracy land. There's a million different.
Griff. Something I wanna call attention to here also is that it seems like sometimes whenever you bring up how bad fiat really is,
Yes,
it's almost like folks get personally attacked, right? And I really just want to challenge and ask why, because because I can understand why maybe for an American, right, that we are Americans, from our perspective, I think it's easy for people to think, oh, the dollar, we're strong and we're, this and that. But I don't think it's the dollar at all that made us who we are. I think it's the human capital and the culture that America was founded upon that truly created a lot of what this became, what America became. It wasn't the dollar. It wasn't these kinds of things, right? We can look at many examples of times where the dollar actually impeded us from moving in a good direction, or it led us to a bad direction, right? The dollar isn't what made America what it is today. It's the human capital and the culture and the belief of what the country was founded upon. And I think that Bitcoin can help move that forward in a good direction.
Well, and if you even to steelman what you were just saying, even if you do think the fact that America is the world reserve currency, right? If you think that is the main reason that America is what it is, if that is like one of your arguments against Nick, what Nick just said, at any point in human history, when the world reserve currency starts using that money as a weapon, it's pretty much over for them. Like, it's just like everybody eventually is just like, all right, we do have to find something new. These guys are nuts. Like, I don't know what world war or what the hell is going to happen. But at the end of the day, we're the bad guy. And I hate to tell everybody this, that kind of just means like the dollar that you love so much is being weaponized in a way that is hurting a lot of people. And I think, Nick, to your original point, and I don't know if this was from the Mahler's podcast. It might have been Money Mahler's. Man, that Monday. I love his podcast. I love and his dad, love it. I love everything about it. It's a great listen. I'm a Jack Mahler's fan. I've never met the guy, never talked to the guy. I just like kind of fanboy. I just like that dude's pretty cool. I like him. But anyway, to get to your original point, because you're telling people what money is and isn't. You're telling them something so basic as 2 + 2, what a dollar is. What's a dollar? What's $10? What's a checking account? What's a savings account? People financially, but also like when you ask them basic ass questions, a lot of them get offended when you tell them, hey, you're like wrong. Like you're not paying attention. And I know you didn't really like think about this, but like, what is money really like as you like start going out there and trying to orange pill people because you listen to our podcast? You will find as you try to like just talk about what that is to people, they will get offended. They will be like, oh, I know what money is. I know what I'm doing. This is what my grandfather did. So this is like what I'm doing. And you're just sitting there like, I wish this was like 1980, even though the times might have been rough in the 80s, give or take. You were still going to experience the biggest upswing in equities, real estate, any asset valuation, just up and to the right. Straight up, like what we're experiencing with Bitcoin, people who are able to buy in the 70s and the 80s, they've experienced, which is they have these big, beautiful homes with acre lots, and they're not in these new developments with KB homes where they're like next to each other. They've lived up in these homes, like, bro, they got like 6 bathrooms, 6 bedrooms. They probably paid like 75 grand for it, maybe 50K. And they're like, yeah, I did that. And I'm just like, I'm like, hell yeah. Like I get it. But like, doesn't it hurt you to see that your kid has no shot at buying the same thing unless you help them with the down payment or something? To which that I will say gets people. When I'm like, well, don't you have kids? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, do you think your kid is really that much like worse at life than you? Or do you think that something's kind of like off about the equation here a little bit? And I've asked that to people. They respond well to that. If anybody's orange pilling, they've got kids. Be like, hey man, is your kid pretty talented? Like a good kid, like went to college, smart, great grades, got a good degree, the whole thing. Yeah. I'm like, so why are they making $400,000 a year and able to buy the same house that you have and afford it with only 20% less of their actual after-tax income? Why are the ratios different when you get an apartment now? Why is it that a minimum wage job, people are so delusional? I've had this conversation with conservatives because that's the group of people, Nick, you know how that minimum wage conversation goes. They're like, a minimum wage is not supposed to buy a house. It's just supposed to be enough for like some teenager to make money. I'm like, no, like seriously, that means you've never actually read anything. It was originally intended to be like a median wage. It was intended for that purpose. That's where it started. And they diluted the dollar so badly that working minimum wage now, you can't, you have to live at home. Like you basically have enough money to fill up your car a month. It's bad. And I'm not sitting here going like, oh, let's raise the minimum wage. I'm saying let's let the market find out what the minimum wage is. Let's let the market figure it out. I would bet right now the real minimum wage is actually a lot higher. Like if people started negotiating going like, dog, like I know you'd have to charge more, but I ain't flipping your burgers for $20 an hour even. Like if I need to like pay rent and it needs to be an affordable part of my income, let's say a high 33% of my after-tax income, dog, you got to pay me like $43 an hour. I'll work here 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. But, you know, like there would be a whole different labor market if they would just let it go. It would be so much different. But I think
that's interesting, Griff. I haven't thought about those through all the way. Those are some interesting thoughts you're posing there.
Well, I'm just saying, like, if you think about it,
I do agree in the free market, though.
That's why it essentially, like, me thinking that way, which is sure it's different, but it's also me just saying, like, yeah, man, like, what is going on now, whether you don't like these TikTok kids or whatever, is a lot harder than what you had to go through, purely because the very thing they're making isn't worth shit. They could actually wipe their ass with that dollar that they just made, and it would make no difference in their life whatsoever. I mean, it seriously doesn't matter. You're screwed. I mean, it's over. So, in my opinion, like, people get offended because you're telling them what is money, man. I feel like people get so offended when you ask that question. Yeah, what is money? Oh, take your profits. In what? What currency should I take my profits in? What should I do? I mean, like, and people are like, oh, and you're just sitting there like, I'm being dead. I'm being so serious. Like, take my profits in what? In dollars?
Well, the question is like, okay, if I'm going to take profits, then I'm, we're here in America. We're going to take these in dollars, right? We would sell Bitcoin for dollars, and then what do we do with these dollars? We just take it and we spend it on shit, or maybe you could argue,
which is fine.
You're going to pay some debt, maybe you're going to pay some debt, or but if you don't have those kinds of plans with it. If you just want to keep that value, if you don't need to use it now, you would like to save it, then what do you do with that? Do you just keep the dollars? Do you just put it in like a savings account, like a high yield savings account? You could do that. I mean, you could, but you're going to lose to inflation over time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just think that people get so offended, man, because they think they like know what it is. And both of us, you had to come off of some sort of high horse where you're just like, oh, that was an interesting little post by Robert Breedlove on what is money 5 years ago now that I read. I just read it. And to be honest with you, I read that thing. I don't read, Nick is attesting to this. It ain't great. It's a habit that's got to change. I don't read. But this Twitter thread, it was like 64 tweets long at the time before Elon bought it and everything. That's how I know this was old. I read that thing. I sent it to everybody, and nobody was really with me. I read that thing like 50 times, and I was like, yeah, I don't know. I can't, like, that makes so much sense. So I have Breedlove to thank for that, where it was just like, oh, that's why you don't shitcoin. I get it. Like, this makes sense. And then you read the Bitcoin Standard, which I direct people to now because I just think it's like front to back. But I've yet to meet somebody who will read the Bitcoin Standard for real and not kind of go like, yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, I get what you're saying. I've had people tell me, they're like, hey, I read the Bitcoin Standard, because I've probably handed out 15, 20 copies of that thing now. I have had people go, I've read it. I buy Bitcoin every day. DCA, baby. I just DCA into Bitcoin. I get them set up on Strike. I probably had 4 or 5 people do it now. And they're like, yeah, it makes sense. The dollar sucks. So there are people, right? I feel like I've been rather successful. But if you talk to every 100 people, Nick, how many people are going to take that conversation? Like, if nobody wants to talk about it, I'm like, cool, like, let's not talk about it. But the moment somebody says something like, oh, yeah, I bought Ethereum, oh, I grill the shit out of them. I'm just like, oh, yeah. I'm like, how many of Ethereum are there? There's only like 21 million Bitcoin. They're like, oh, I don't know, the supply. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's cool. I'm like, Bitcoin doesn't have an owner. Like, Ethereum has like an owner, right? They're like, no, I didn't know that. I'm like, all right. I'm like, cool.
Starting off hot here.
I'm like, all right. I'm like, did you know that like Ethereum's rolled back their chain before, like canceled transactions and like really rolled back their quote unquote blockchain? They're like, no, I didn't know what that was. And that's your average ETH guy right there. I'm like, oh, all right. So you don't know anything. I'm like, did you know that they were proof of work went to proof of stake, and you got to pretty much donate like 32 Ethereum, which is like, I don't even know, like $70,000 just to be a node? No, I don't know that. I'm like, all right, why are we talking about this then? Just buy Bitcoin, man. It's over. And it's so interesting. There's crypto people. There's
no coiners,
dollar guys, no coin people,
old folks, young folks. The young ones, the young ones that are so hardcore traditional finance, those ones I think are really interesting. We're like, oh shit.
That's so funny. I mean, crypto does prey, in my opinion, crypto preys on the young, and I'm not that smart, so I got into it for a little bit too, mind you, everybody. The stupid, the young, the stupid, and the risky profiles. People who are just like, like, cool, my money in a 401k, but like that shit doesn't go up like crypto. Let's see if crypto goes up. I don't really care. Well, let's go. Just the people who don't like, it is what it is. They're not really planning anything. So that's what crypto's for. In my opinion, if you're in Bitcoin for as long as Nick and I have been in Bitcoin, you're a bit more well-educated. It's rare you talk. How many Bitcoiners have you talked to that you'd be like, you're a Bitcoin guy for sure, and he doesn't know like some pretty historical things in reference to money and time and like how everything works. Rare for me personally.
Yep.
As soon as they mention their crypto portfolio, though, I'm like, let me ask you a question about monetary history real quick. Never know it. They never know. That's not a shot at anybody that I've talked to that could potentially listen to that. I'm just saying that every time somebody has crypto in their portfolio, 99% of the time, because this Ben Morrison, who is a fan of ours on our podcast, he kind of seems to know, and he's still doing the crypto thing. So that's like an anomaly. Most of the time, if you have crypto in your portfolio and not just Bitcoin, I'm like, you probably don't know anything about anything. Probably know nothing. You're probably just living. Like, what? So, 1933.
This one's got pretty colors.
I'm like, what's 1933? And how about
I
dog?
like these kind of dogs. I'm gonna buy some of that.
They have dog with hat now. Dog with hat. And it went up like 124%. And I said, you guys think that has something to do with Bitcoin? That has something to say about the dollar.
Oh my goodness, man.
I don't know about Bitcoin. I'm like, that's nuts. I'm like, you guys think that we're like, that's what we're doing? All right. Well, like, I'm going to keep buying the Bitcoin, and you guys are probably going to keep getting it confused with dog with hat and Dogecoin and shit. And that's totally fine. That's totally fine. If you think about it, nobody's going to have Bitcoin. And the people doing it now, the way that it seems like it's playing out, and I don't, I love the game theory, and I'd love for all the small nations to adopt it. The smartest people will adopt it the fastest, or the gullible, I guess, if you will. But most likely, the smartest 10%, the smartest 1%, and the smartest 0.1% of people will buy the ever-living hell out of Bitcoin under 100,000, under $1 million, at $1 million. They're just going to be buying Bitcoin for the rest of their life because Bitcoin is the money. Those people will probably adopt Bitcoin faster, which means that, in my opinion, well over half of the world could be like
shit out of luck.
Just like, I mean, seriously, think about it. Imagine like a $200,000 candle. Think that could kind of happen, man. Because if you think about what you've already seen is 17,000 in a month, if it gets to the point where there's only 3 Bitcoin dispensed, then guys, guess what? This happens every 4 years. 2028 rolls around. Finally, Trump can't take credit for why Bitcoin's going up so much. Trump's out of the picture. Now all of a sudden there's only 1.5 Bitcoin. And that is the money. Okay, well, if you didn't get any Bitcoin, you don't have any money. You have no money. What do you do? And I don't know what to tell people, to be honest with you. But I have thought about that scenario because I think BlackRock's going to get it. MicroStrategy is going to get it. Eventually, they're going to be buying up so much, like nation states are going to go like, shit, like probably need to get some of this. I just see the biggest players adopting it. I see the most powerful. I don't see the little guys adopting it. And I talk to the little guys every day. Every gas station guy I talk to, I go, yeah, how about that Bitcoin, baby? Every time I check out, they're like, oh, you buying? I'm like, dog, take whatever you're getting hourly here, buy Bitcoin. Just buy it. You'll be so happy. You'll remember me forever. Just buy it. And then I walk out. I do it to everybody because I do feel like it's probably going to help them eventually because Bitcoin is money. If it's money, total addressable market cap, an uncountable amount of dollars. That means infinite, everybody. And there's only 21 million Bitcoin, and a third of them are probably gone and or lost. A third of them are probably owned, and a third of them are kind of for sale, kind of not for sale. So might want to get a little Bitcoin.
Come check us on Twitter. You can see it down here if you're watching. That's where we like to write and interact and meme and shitpost and really get after it. So come see us on Twitter. It's at Nyc Griff Show, all spelled out. NYCANDGRIFFSHOW. And if you're not watching, we've got video on Spotify and on YouTube. So watch us there. Come at us on Twitter. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.